Who are you and what do you do? Are you ready for some quick fire questions? What's your tech stack that you use to run the business and run your life at the moment?
Genuinely, that's caught me quite off guard. Can you cut this and make it shorter and then just make it look like I answered straight away?
Welcome to the JOD Pod, a micro podcast where we interview founders, entrepreneurs, CEOs, coaches, and authors. Today, we are joined by a very special guest, my friend, Chris Bruno. Welcome to the podcast, Chris.
Thanks for finally inviting me, Jod.
Well, I thought 50 episodes in, it'd be worth now kind of tapping you on the shoulder and see if you wanted to have a go.
Well, now that you've found your feet, I'm really looking forward to this.
Thanks very much, mate. So for those of us who don't know who Chris Bruno is, who are you and what do you do?
So I'm Chris. I'm the founder of Social Inc., a digital marketing agency that I set up back in 2008 in Gibraltar. In 2014, I moved over to the UK, brought the business with us, carried on working here. And early this year, in fact, we've just niched down specifically. And now we're working 100% focused with blockchain companies all over the world at the moment.
You've started the company in Gibraltar and then moved it to the UK?
That's exactly right. I was living in Gibraltar at the time and then eventually decided I wanted to move back to the UK. So decided to move back here and move the company with me.
Wow. And that was 13 years ago?
2008 I started it. Thanks for the reminder. Yes, 13 years ago. How the time flies when you're having fun or something like that. So
you were doing dial-up digital marketing, uploading 8-bit images and stuff like that?
You say that. In 2011, we set up an online television channel, and I can remember we used to pay for an 8 meg line. Now, this was a big deal because 8 meg was just available. And we used to pay for an 8 meg line, and if we were lucky, we would get a meg down. And if we were really lucky, we'd get somewhere in the region of 1/4 of a megabyte upload speed. Now, as someone who's doing a lot of YouTube stuff, imagine the upload times and imagine the reduced quality for videos when you need to try and upload that kind of content every day.
The thing is, though, you look at that content like that's available now on YouTube from Gibraltar TV, and you look fantastic. We'll link to that in the show notes, definitely.
I should have known that was coming. This was all a trap.
There's no escape. No escape, Chris. Awesome. So, Chris, I know you've done a few careers before becoming an entrepreneur, but is being an entrepreneur something you'd always wanted to be?
No, not really. But I had a couple of bad experiences in the last jobs that I'd had before starting my own business. The one just before setting up on my own was with an estate agent, where I'd managed to do a fairly significant amount of revenue for the agency that I was working for. I tried to have a chat about, career progression, salaries, etc. Was sort of told to walk before I could run. Found that rather amusing. Walked back to my desk, typed up my resignation, handed it in there and then, and 2 weeks later left. And within 2 weeks, I set up Social Inc. So, not something that necessarily I always thought I would go into, but definitely something that was born out of wanting to do things a different way.
It's interesting. It's something that Daniel Priestley, the author, talks about. He was working as a sales guy, made the company a lot of money, and then wanted to have a bigger conversation about having a bigger slice of the pie. And the owner basically said, jog on. And that's what ended up, him setting up a business. So it's an interesting narrative and story, people moving into starting their own business because they're not given the opportunity in the business that they're already working in. I'm guessing there's loads of people at the moment that are going through that post lockdown, thinking about starting their own thing. Yeah,
definitely. I think it's a really strange one because looking back at it now, it's really easy to sit there and say, thank God they didn't offer me a $5,000 bonus.
Oh, really?
Because otherwise I would have still stayed there, and then maybe it would have been another year or another 2 years, or maybe I would have gone up by another $3,000 the year after that and then stayed there for another year. So it's quite easy to look back at those moments and sort of say, it could have gone one of two ways. At the end of the day, look, being an entrepreneur or owning your own business has a huge amount of ups and downs. It's very much a roller coaster. I don't care what anyone else says or anyone that pretends to say that it's very easy on like an Instagram account when they're sat in front of a rented Airbnb and a Lamborghini or whatever it is that they're punting. But the reality of it is that it's a hell of a journey. It's got some amazing rewards. It's got some real challenging moments. But at the end of the day, for me, it's worked out really well, just thanks to that one person saying, no, we won't give you a salary increase.
Man, sliding doors, eh? Those things that happen that change our life. So you started Social Link. How did you get your first customer?
Now, I've been listening to your episodes, and this afternoon in particular at the gym, I sat there racking my brain to think who my very first customer was when I started the agency.
Yeah.
And I think it might be one or number 2 or 3, but it was very early doors. It was a wealthy Asian chap who had just moved to Gibraltar, and he had decided to invest in quite a lot of property. And so he was looking to do something different with his properties in terms of renting them, rather than just going to an estate agent and saying, put these up for rent. So we helped him to do all the branding and all the brochures and stuff like that, basically to help him rent these out with a concierge service and all sorts of other things. We took care of all that marketing. And it's really, like I said, it's just funny because I did have to really scratch my head thinking back to those days, thinking, wow, how did I get my first customer and where did I get them or who were they?
You've explained who they were. How did you get them as a customer?
So interestingly enough, when I first set up the agency, I didn't know exactly what we were going to do. So you've got to bear in mind, this is 2008. Facebook is sort of becoming very popular, but still isn't really something that we know of as a business tool or anything else. Business pages were just sort of starting up. And obviously my background for that previous year had been in property. So I had a lot of contacts to people where we had done deals, where we had sold people properties or helped them buy properties. So I ended up reaching out to a few of the people that I knew and I had in my Rolodex from the property days. And obviously from the conversations and a couple of them that I had fairly decent relationships with, this was all born out of that and just basically sort of snowballed and became a project.
Man, that's awesome. So for anybody else out there that's thinking about starting their own business, get in contact with potential clients that you'd known before. Is that what you're advocating?
Any networking, if you don't start with the people that you know, then I think you're missing out on a trick, right? So if you're looking at doing something and you've already worked in that similar industry, you probably know 2, 3, 5, 10 people within that space. It's a great place to start. And also the people that you've worked with and the people that you know already quite well, you can ask them for referrals or ask them for introductions as well. So I think it's a great starting point.
Nice. Thanks, Chris. So that was 13 years ago. You've just mentioned that you've niched the business recently. Talk me about that. What are you focusing on now?
Yeah, so it was back in 2017, we started getting involved with blockchain companies, and we did a lot of work back in those days up until sort of end of 2018, I think, early 2019, when things started to calm down after the whole initial crypto bull run and craziness that happened back then. And it's been a space that we've always stayed in. We've always worked somehow or in some capacity with companies within that space. And over the last sort of few months, and obviously you and I were working together earlier this year and last year as well, it's been a challenge. We want to try and help small businesses. We love working with small startup, mom and pops kind of businesses. But the reality is, as a model and as an agency, it's not really the ideal clientele. It doesn't help you to make sure that you've always got that cash flow. It doesn't help you always have that security of knowing who your audience is going to be and who you're working with. So we decided to focus on one of the industries in particular, and it happens to be one that we really enjoy. It's also one that's got a huge amount of innovation and recently more and more regulation that's coming into place. So having done this before for other brands, we're in a really good space to be able to help them.
What does that mean? What are you actually doing?
We're running digital marketing and social media marketing content for blockchain businesses, and we also offer a fractional CMO service for all startup projects that haven't quite got to the point yet of needing to hire a 150, 200,000 pound a year CMO, but that do need support in terms of the direction of what they're trying to do. That's a real challenge for a lot of businesses. They've got a small marketing budget, so they start spending it, and they'll spend on social media, or they'll spend on PPC, or they'll spend on ads online, and then suddenly they'll realize that actually they're not really understanding, or they're not even sure what it was that they were trying to achieve in the first place. So helping brands and projects to be able to really build that out, build out that strategy, define what the objectives are. And we do everything by working in 12-week sprints now. So we only focus on what we're trying to achieve for the next 12 weeks for the business, for the brand. And obviously the longer term goals are in the background. but we really want to help people to actually get results in a much shorter time frame.
Awesome. That's such an exciting space, especially with crypto gaming, I think, is a big thing at the moment. And I think that, that's so nascent, isn't it? There's so many learnings and there's so many mistakes that are going to happen in the marketplace, but there's so much opportunity because of that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, today marks a pretty big day. An ETF with Bitcoin has actually just gone live in the US, and that's been completely approved by the SEC. That's a huge step. NFTs are becoming more and more predominant and more popular. We're seeing more and more use cases for them, which makes for a really interesting space. DeFi currently has tens of billions locked up now in funds, which is incredible to see as well. And you've just mentioned it there as well. Blockchain gaming is becoming a whole new space where all of these things almost end up coming together. So you've got projects such as play to earn games, whereby the more you do and the more you're involved in the game, the more you engage with the game, the more potential you have to earn from that. But also it brings in the NFT use case as well, which is really nice to see. So people collecting items and loot boxes and things like that, but them actually having a secondary value other than just within Fortnite's universe, for example. So it's going to be a really exciting time to be involved in this.
Do you think there might be a kind of company that spins out of that, like where I remember playing Football Manager at university. This is a massive sidebar here. And I got Dover Athletic into the Premiership. And then, like, as a saved game, maybe turning that into an NFT that someone would buy so that they could have Dover Athletic in the Premiership, because I built it up and it's naturally built to that stage. So you kind of created it and crafted it. Do you think that would have been worth money?
You still got that save game file?
No, I remember. I remember the day when I accidentally saved over it. It was a bad day.
Gutting.
Yeah,
Gutting.
It was
years of work.
Years of work. Not like that guy that's got a load of blockchain on his hard drive in the rubbish landfill. Yeah, he's devastated because it was worth a lot of money 10 years ago. I don't know how much it'd be worth now. Anyway, we digress. Chris, are you ready for some quick fire questions?
No idea, but let's find out.
Awesome. What's your tech stack that you use to run the business and run your life at the moment?
That's a nice, complicated one. Okay, so for communication, we use Slack predominantly. For project management and things like that, we use Notion, which is a really versatile tool. We use G Suite for pretty much everything else, to be honest with you, and trying to move more and more away from Zoom just because another platform, another set of costs, etc., and it's unnecessary. And when we're doing podcasts, we like to use Riverside as well. I'd say those are our main ones. Oh, and Planable, which is actually a really cool tool to be able to prepare content and get it approved by clients or a third party. So if you're in a business and you needed a manager's approval, it automatically takes the approvals and then schedules content, which is really cool.
So that's interesting. You literally run an entire digital marketing agency using that tech stack.
I'm now thinking about it and trying to double check.
I think I can think of one.
Looking at tabs that are open.
Maybe Canva?
We don't use Canva anymore. No.
Oh man, Canva. The sponsors. You've been dropped. I'm sorry.
But to be fair, though, if Adobe wants to sponsor your podcast,
sure.
Literally, with Adam, who you know as well, we've now got him learning how to use Photoshop so that he can level up on his design skills as well, which has been fantastic. We use Final Cut Pro for videos. I mean, the tech stack gets pretty wide if you start looking into all these elements. WordPress is our predominant platform of choice for website design. Yeah, I mean, the list goes on in terms of the small little bits, but...
Nice. Well, this is great because you're just increasing the list of companies that I can reach out to as potential sponsors for the JOD Pod. So, the more the merrier, Chris. I appreciate it.
Microsoft, 5.
What's your most recommended book, Chris?
So recently, it's and I'm going to get the name of this wrong, so please put a link to the real name and the actual book. But it's Alex Hormozi's book, The $100 Million Offers. So how to write offers so good people can't say no or people can't refuse. It's a phenomenal book. In fact, it played a part in us changing the focus of our business and niching down more. It's also helped us in terms of the offer that we now offer to people, what we're actually focusing on in terms of the results orientation, the timeframes of how we're working with clients. Everything pretty much has changed. And that book played a really, really big part. So I'd say anyone that's running a business or looking at or thinking about doing it for anything, and even if you're just a marketer or a salesperson, have a look at it and get a really good understanding. There's some really good exercises in it and free video resources and stuff. Watch them, do the exercises. You'll be amazed what I think you'll get out of it.
That's awesome. I've heard in some networking groups that I'm a part of some really good things about this book. I don't have a commute at the moment, so I haven't had the chance to do much reading. But that's certainly one that's going to be at the top of the list when I next go on one of my long holidays.
Also a good note for the author as well. He's put it at 79p, I think, which is the lowest he can possibly do on Amazon Kindle. So he's not doing this to try and make money. It's literally a free giveaway. It's giving him exposure, obviously, and helping to build his brand. But more importantly, he's looking to work with brands that have hit 3 to 10 million upwards. So he just wants to try and give that information away for free. So for 79p, no excuse.
Wow, what a resounding referral from Chris there.
Less than a quid, just go and buy it.
Just go do it. You can buy 3 of them instead of a latte. Share some copies with your friends.
Probably buy 6 of them instead of a latte.
Where you live. So, Chris, who do you love watching on your YouTubes or listening to on the podcasts?
Obviously, other than the JOD Pod. So for a fact I've listened and watched Tim Ferriss for years, and I still continue to do so. And so Tim Ferriss is one of the podcasts I've listened to for the longest. I really enjoyed that. I think it's got a huge amount of insights, although some of the guests now have been weird and wonderful, but I do really enjoy Tim, and that's probably my biggest. Obviously, the JOD Pod. We've also just helped a client release the 100 million, building £100 million business in public podcast, James Johnson. So that's been great to see how he's getting on with that as well. And the last one probably is actually This Week in Startups. That's also one that I've listened to for many, many years. Jason Calacanis, San Francisco-based angel investor. And yeah, again, I went to one of his shows in San Francisco in 2013, which was fantastic, and kind of been listening to the podcast ever since as well.
Well, we'll definitely link to James Johnson's new podcast, help support that. I don't know if Tim and Jason need the support of the JOD Pod to grow their listenership. So you can search for that yourselves. But
I mean, there's always the All About Digital Marketing podcast if people are looking for something to listen to.
Oh, Chris, we'll definitely link to that. Don't you worry. You've been recommended as a podcast to listen to a couple of times on the JOD Pod. Kay and Ellen both recommended your podcast.
Glad to hear it.
It's good. Chris, who's an up-and-comer, a superstar in your network, someone that we should be keeping an eye on for the future?
Okay, we've spoken to, I think, so far this year, nearly 40 people for the All About Digital Marketing podcast, and it's ranged from huge multi-million pound international companies now, all the way through down to people literally just sort of starting. And there's been some incredible people that we've met and come across. I couldn't really pick out one person and say that I'm following them intently to see where this goes next. But yeah, there's been just a huge amount of cool people to be able to have conversations with.
And Chris, what's the best way for someone, after listening to this, if they're interested in what you're doing in the blockchain space, or they're interested in digital marketing or how to start a business, what's the best way for them to reach out and make contact with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So www.socialinc.co, just .co, don't add the .uk at the end. And otherwise on Twitter, you can find me at Just Chris Bruno, and on LinkedIn as well. I believe it's Just Chris Bruno as well.
Fantastic. Thanks, Chris. There we have it. Chris Bruno. He's the founder and CEO of Social Inc., the digital marketing agency. They're a blockchain digital marketing agency now. They're focused on turning hype. There's a lot of hype in that blockchain marketplace into results. Chris's new tagline is "Me marketing you blockchain," which doesn't work when another person says it out loud. But I think it's awesome, and I think it's the best thing you've ever done, Chris. Well done.
I did that.
He managed to get his first customer after setting up Social Inc. by going through his old Rolodex, getting in contact with someone that potentially might need some of his digital marketing expertise, which is a very good tactic for anybody out there that's about to start a business or is just starting a business. Get in contact with those people that you already know. His tech stack includes Slack, Notion, G Suite, Riverside, which we're recording this podcast on, Planable, Adobe, and Final Cut Pro for all those videos of his from his podcasts that he releases. Chris recommends recommend the book $100 Million Offers by Alex Hermoses, which, again, I've had so many recommendations to read that. I think that's a great recommendation, and thanks for being the first on the JOD Pod to recommend that book. He loves listening to Tim Ferriss's podcast and Jason Calacanis's podcast this week in startups, but he definitely thinks that we should be listening to a £100 million business podcast by James Johnson. There's a new podcast. We'll definitely link to that in the show notes, so you can hear his journey and what he's trying to do with his business, District 4. And he hasn't recommended anyone really that we should be keeping an eye on, but we should definitely head over to All About Digital Marketing and listen to some of the conversations that he's had on that podcast. There's some real exciting guests that he's managed to bag in the past, including the CEO of Riverside, for example, who runs this app that we're recording this episode in today. And you can follow up with Chris directly on his Twitter handle at just Chris Bruno, or on LinkedIn. Just search for Chris Bruno, or Christopher Bruno, I think is on LinkedIn, so that you can find him. Drop him a question, say that you heard about him on the JOD Pod. I'm sure he'd be absolutely delighted to answer all your blockchain and crypto questions when Lambo. And then you can also check out his website, socialinc.co. We'll put links to this in all the show notes, but you can follow up with him directly via all of those links there. Chris, thank you so much for being a guest on the JOD Pod.
Been a pleasure, JOD.
And thank you for joining us today on the JOD Pod. If you've been inspired by Chris and you want to hear more founder stories, you want to play the YouTube game, you want to play the algorithm, you need to hit subscribe, hit the bell, hit the thumbie uppy button, which means like, and that will mean you get a notification every time we upload one of these videos to YouTube. Why not also ask Chris a question in the comments below? Comments really help these videos get out and get in front of more eyeballs. They'll also help Chris out indirectly from the links that we're sharing down here, and it just brings a little bit of joy and happiness into my heart when I see people asking questions. So hopefully you've been inspired by Chris's story today. Please go out yourself, start something new, and inspire the next generation. Thanks for joining us today on the JOD Pod. If you enjoyed this interview, why don't you check out some of these other interviews that we've done on the JOD Pod. More inspirational CEOs, coaches, entrepreneurs, founders, and authors. I'm sure there's something here that will inspire you to build something new.